The venue wasn't packed with noise, it was packed with heartbeats. On a day charged with warmth, gratitude, and memories, Sweet Guluva stepped into his final fan meet and greet not as a former housemate, not even as a reality TV star, but as a man who had changed lives simply by showing up as himself. The air inside the hall was thick with excitement. But beneath the chatter, the camera flashes, and the hustle of his team making sure every detail was perfect, there was something deeper. This wasn't just about selfies or celebration. It was a thank you, a tribute, a homecoming. From the moment Sweet Guluva entered, the room shifted. Fans stood. Some gasped, others cried, many just smiled quietly, their eyes wide with reverence. This man, calm, collected, unwavering, had carried something rare into the Big Brother Mzansi house. Peace. Not passivity, not silence, but a steady presence rooted in authenticity. And that presence had rippled far beyond the show's walls. Today it all came back to him. They came bearing gifts, but what they truly brought was love. A brand new PlayStation 5, nestled in a custom gift box. The latest Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, still sealed, its chrome glint catching the lights. A Sony FX30 digital camera, professional, sleek. A perfect tool for a man who had learned to capture people's hearts. A MacBook, gifted by a group of fans who had pooled their resources for months, just to give back what he gave them in spirit. A designer clothes steamer. Fragrance sets. Personalized t-shirts. Embroidered towels. Rolls of fan letters, handwritten and tied with string. There were even prayer candles marked with Team Sweet Guluva, their wax carrying hope and gratitude. Every item was a gesture. And every gesture held a story. You could see it in Sweet Guluva's face. He wasn't prepared for the flood of generosity and, more importantly, for the way these people looked at him. Like someone who had reminded them of grace in a world too quick to chase noise. He didn't try to center attention on himself. He nodded, greeted people one by one, and when he received each gift, he held it for a moment longer than expected, as if trying to absorb the intent behind it. One young woman stepped forward with tears in her eyes. "You reminded me that peace is power," she whispered. Sweet Guluva smiled gently and opened his arms. She fell into them as if embracing a brother. Another fan brought a scrapbook. Inside were photos of Sweet Guluva from the show, with captions written in colored ink. Below one image was a line that read, "You didn't need to raise your voice. You raised the bar." There were no speeches, no long addresses. That's not how Sweet Guluva moved through the world. Instead, he allowed the moment to breathe. Let the hugs linger. Let the hands he shook be held just a second longer. He was giving time back to the people who had given theirs to him. And perhaps that's what made the day so unforgettable. He didn't treat the fans like an audience. He treated them like companions on the road. Some had taken flights to be there. Others had crossed provinces in buses, some arriving straight from work with tired eyes and glowing hearts. And not a single one left feeling unseen. He took photos without being rushed. He laughed softly at inside jokes pulled from the show. He accepted every letter, every box, every token of love like someone who knew what it felt like to not be celebrated, and who now chose to celebrate others in return. As the camera clicked and music played softly in the background, a child reached up to hand Sweet Guluva a drawing. It was a crayon portrait, Sweet Guluva beside the Big Brother Mzansi eye. "That's you," the little boy said, smiling shyly. "You look kind." Sweet Guluva crouched down to meet his eyes. "Thank you," he said gently. "So do you." That's the thing about moments like this. They don't always come with headlines, but they stay in the hearts of those who live them. At one point, Sweet Guluva sat quietly at a table, surrounded by letters and unwrapped gifts. He didn't speak. He simply looked around, soaking it all in. The magnitude, the beauty, the loyalty, the inexplicable joy of realizing that simply being himself had inspired so many to be themselves too. A fellow housemate approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You didn't win the show," she said softly, "but you won something bigger." And she was right. Because this wasn't a send-off, it was a celebration of legacy. As the sun began to dip beyond the windows, casting a golden hue across the venue, a spontaneous chant rose from the crowd, "Sweet Guluva, Sweet Guluva. It echoed not just in volume but in truth. These weren't fans hyping a celebrity. These were lives changed, spirits touched, people made better by simply watching someone live in alignment with their values. When his team finally signaled that it was time to wrap up, Sweet Guluva stood and faced the room once more. He didn't say much. He just bowed slightly, palms together, and whispered, "Thank you." And maybe that was the most powerful thing of all. In a world full of noise, Sweet Guluva proved that sincerity doesn't need a microphone. The love didn't roar, it glowed. As the doors closed behind him and people began gathering their things, there was no sadness in the air, just fullness. People left knowing they had witnessed something real, something pure. And Sweet Guluva left knowing he didn't need to win a trophy to win hearts. He already had. Later that evening, hashtags began trending. Hashtag Sweet Guluva finale, hashtag thank you Sweet G, hashtag he touched us. Social media lit up with clips, tributes, and emotional stories from fans recounting what he meant to them. Some had battled depression and said Sweet Guluva's calm helped them feel safe. Others had struggled with identity and found in him a quiet courage. Many had watched the show with their families, united over dinner tables because of the dignity he brought to every scene. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't expected it. But the people gave it freely. And while Sweet Guluva may move into new opportunities, partnerships, campaigns, advocacy, perhaps even storytelling of his own, he will do so with an army behind him. An army not built through spectacle but through sincerity. He reminded everyone that in a world starved for authenticity, you don't have to be loud to be heard. And that may be the greatest victory of all. As night crept gently over the city skyline, the echoes of the day still lingered softly in Sweet Guluva's heart. Alone for the first time since the meet and greet, he sat quietly with the gifts surrounding him, reminders not of luxury but of love. The bright ribbons had begun to droop slightly, the lights had dimmed, but the emotion, that stayed, heavy and beautiful. He opened a handwritten card from a fan named Kibetswe. Inside was a simple message in ink that had smudged slightly from teardrops. Asterisk, you helped me through my loneliness. When you smiled, I remembered I could smile too. Asterisk, he held the letter close to his chest for a long moment. Not because he needed to read it again but because it felt like home. Sweet Guluva wasn't thinking about sponsorships or what came next in his career. Right there, in the quiet hum of evening, he was thinking about the strangers who became supporters, the moments he unknowingly gave people hope. He realized that his presence in that house, his voice, his steadiness, it had filled gaps in others' lives, even when he was uncertain of his own. Tears welled in his eyes, not of sadness but of overwhelming truth. He hadn't performed. He hadn't put on a mask. He had simply lived with dignity and grace, and that was what had spoken to people. There was no need to chase the spotlight or compete with noise. Sweet Guluva had illuminated lives by being grounded, steady, and sincere, like a lighthouse in the fog, guiding people quietly back to themselves. Please tell us which country you are watching us from.